F sharp, A sharp, revisited.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited, the music review podcast where we like to talk about music. I am Joe, the music critic reasonable person, and with me is the upstanding citizen Nick.
Ayo.
Hey, and today we're going to do something slightly different. Instead of talking about the most recent music releases, we thought we'd go over some of the albums and songs released in 2019 that we didn't quite get the chance to talk about on previous podcasts.
Most recent releases from past month didn't really interest us much.
Not that much, so yeah, we
There's
thought,
like one or two which we could have talked about maybe.
yeah, so we're playing catch up today.
We're taking the easy route out.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, it might be the easy route out, but I feel like I'm going to enjoy this podcast because first up, we're going to be talking about Lizzo.
Lizzo's that artist that I listen to in my bedroom and pretend that I have self-esteem.
Same.
Thanks, Lizzo.
We love you, Lizzo. She
Because
dropped an
she
album.
loves us.
Gah. But she dropped an album earlier this year in April called 'Cause I Love You. 11 tracks, 33 minutes, so every song is that kind of 2 to 3 minute
You
pop length.
started doing that thing where I say that the length of the album at the beginning of each thing.
Yeah, well,
So
I
proud.
think, like, well, I feel like this is important because it's a very kind of, each song is very short, snappy. It definitely fits that kind of very easy to listen to pop structure, and that's pretty much what this album is. It's a very good, catchy combination of pop, rap, and soul.
A little bit of R&B thrown in,
Yeah,
a good measure.
yeah,
I have mentioned that the album is a very good length. The songs are sort of like quick and snappy.
yes, and that works. That works quite well.
And I think that the songs themselves are generally pretty well constructed. The beats and instrumentals are pretty good at making you feel good.
Yes,
They're nearly always sort of upbeat and bubbly, or when they are slow, they're sort of irreverent and like self-aware enough.
yeah, and at times gorgeous as well. But I think one of the biggest allures of this album is that it's just dripping with Lizzo's personality. She's not afraid to just drop it on every pretty much every
Yeah,
single track. I mean the best, like the first track pretty much lays down everything that's good about the album in one track. It's got great bars in the verses. Lizzo absolutely kills the vocal performance. With I mean they're kind of over the top vocals, but I think it works for the song.
she does excellent vocal performances on the album.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it translates really well live as well. If you've ever seen Lizzo live, then it's a treat.
yeah,
And then Lizzo's lyrics as well, often very very funny, quite inspiring. Her delivery, like you said, she never sounds uncertain of herself on any of the tracks. There is no vulnerability there whatsoever. This
mm,
is very very sure in herself and spreading like trying to spread that confidence to other people.
yeah. And it comes across as such a treat. When you said that she's so sure of herself and confident with her lyrics, I just can't think of the first track where she just says, "Once upon a time I was a hoe, now I don't even want a hoe no more." It's just it's just funny, but it's really charming at the same time.
I think the messages of self-positivity are cool to a point. I mean, if you find perfection in yourself, then that's cool. You can be happy about it. At the same time, it can be very detrimental to your mental and physical health to just assume that you're perfect.
I agree with you philosophically on that one, I think.
I like Lizzo, but then I mean, I think of those adverts I see on the sides of buses that say obesity causes cancer, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's scary.
I think there is a balance though,
I
because
think she hits it quite well.
I think she does as well. I don't, because I mean there are a lot of songs on here about loving yourself, but I don't think it's too self-affectionate. It's not over the top, and it's just nice, really. I think she gets a good balance. I suppose let's talk about some of the individual tracks.
Can I talk about a string of tracks? Can I talk about two strings of tracks?
Go ahead.
The first five tracks are pretty much perfect. There's such an incredibly strong string of tracks going through 'Cause I Love You, Like a Girl, Juice, Soulmate, and Jerome.
Mm,
That's just so great. The following three tracks are sort of my problem with the album.
kind of the same for me.
I
Although Soulmate didn't do as much for me, I have to say, but
it's my
yeah.
favorite on the album, but fair enough. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I think those first five tracks are really strong, and the
yeah,
following three tracks, well, They're not bad. They're not the best on the album. I think Cry Baby is the first track on the album that just doesn't completely command my
Mm.
attention. It's in previous tracks, you're sort of like, yeah, her performance is very over the top. Here, it does feel like it's all performance and no real substance.
Yeah.
Then you've got Tempo, which is just so
Okay.
repetitive.
Okay, I need to say something about tempo because this song, I don't dislike it, but there are just certain things about the song that kind of annoys me. And firstly, it's the use of Lizzo's use of the term tempo because tempo refers to any pace, both slow and fast. But in this song, she seems to exclusively seem to refer to it as a fast pace thing, which is the first thing that annoys me.
I'm all about that presto, she should be saying.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's Missy Elliott's verse on it. Half the time I listen to that track, I feel like I'm entertained by it. The other half of the times I listen to it, I just feel like it's a bit of a
I'm
gimmick.
going to be honest, I've never really noticed her on the track. I know
Okay.
she's there because it says it in the song title, but I don't think she stands out at all. I just don't
She
really
she
notice her.
she rolls her R's at the end of every
Is
single
that
line
Missy
in.
Elliott's
Yeah.
verse? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I kind of just assumed that was Lizzo. Either way, that
Yeah.
that verse is great. I think it's genius, but
Okay.
in that case, I feel like her feature just doesn't really add much if I'm just believing it to be Lizzo.
Mm. Yeah, but then you've got Gucci Mane in the track afterwards. Exactly how I feel.
I like Gucci Mane's verse, but I think it's a very nice feature and complements Lizzo. I just think the track itself is a lesser track on the album. It's not
Yeah,
that interesting.
I think that's fair. I'm dedicating to disliking Gucci Mane's verse because he references "Dirty Bit" by the Black Eyed Peas. so
Oh, sorry, I missed that 1 out of 10 album.
so
I'm sorry, Lizzo.
so
Gucci Mane
yeah,
let you down.
yeah. So I kind of agree with you that that stretch of tracks isn't that strong, but then the final three tracks
They're
afterwards,
pretty good.
I'm hype about those
I,
tracks.
I don't once again I don't think they're as good as the first 5 tracks on the album, but they're better than the previous 3.
But I wanna shout out "Heaven Help Me" because I like that song when I first heard it, but of all the songs on the album, it has grown on me absolutely massively. It has definitely got my favorite chorus of the year. It's just so damn infectious, upbeat, summary. And then unexpectedly towards the coda, you've just got this lovely arrangement and Lizzo playing her flute in such a delicate way.
Yeah, I love that Lizzo plays the flute. That's just
Yeah,
great.
it's I really do love that track. I've got a real soft spot for "Heaven Help Me." I think it's great.
Is it as good a chorus as "Party for One" by Carly Rae Jepsen?
Oh,
I've thrown a spanner in the works. That's
oh
not even the best
no.
song on Carly Rae Jepsen's
I
album.
mean, well, I think it is, but I think "Heaven Help Me" has just edged it in better chorus, personally.
Well, there are a lot of positives about this Lizzo album. The mostly being Lizzo herself.
Yeah,
She just completely destroys every track with her personality
destroys
in
in
a
a
good
good
way.
way.
Yes, dominates.
Yes,
But I think there's just that sort of string in the middle, which
which lets it down.
yeah,
Well, I'll highlight a few tracks from the first half of the album that I particularly liked. I've already lavished some praise on "'Cause I Love You." Let's look at Jerome.
Jerome's hilarious.
I identify with Jerome. Poor Jerome.
Jerome is a scrub.
He needs to take his ass home.
Yeah.
Come back when he's grown.
It's the
And I
first, I think, I mean, after, I think "'Cause I Love You," I wouldn't really count so much as a slow track because it just explodes onto the
yeah,
album. I feel like Jerome is probably the first slow track on the
it's
album.
definitely the first proper ballad,
Yeah.
ballady ballad.
And yeah, it's still just so full of energy
So fun of energy. It's so
and
funny.
humour and wit.
And it kind of makes me think a little bit because Jerome has the same chord progression as "Creep" by Radiohead. So maybe Tom York is Jerome in this context.
I never noticed that.
I don't know. That's just a little something I noticed that made me laugh. And then my other favorite track on the album is "Juice." I love "Juice" a lot. I think compositionally, it's probably the tightest song on the album. I love the chord progression, the use of just slightly jazzier chords. The bass line in the pre-chorus and chorus is fun, bouncy. The added synth tones in the post-chorus is again just a lovely bounce. Lizzo's personality is all over the place. I think it's definitely the tightest composed pop song on the album. So yeah,
As for me, I sort of alternate between Like a Girl and Soulmate being my favourite track on the album. Soulmate, I think, has got the better chorus, but Like a Girl is just so.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Like a Girl
empowering.
might just have the best lyrics on the album. The only X's that I care about are in my chromosomes. It's funny. So yeah,
I think I will be humming and singing Soulmate to myself for the rest of the year at least, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. I mean, there are definitely quite a lot of tracks on here that I enjoy listening to, and I have continued enjoying listening to since this album was released in April. So
Yeah, it's a good album. It's not a faultless album, but I enjoy it a lot. I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
I give it a strong 7. I think
It's close to an 8.
it's definitely closer to the 8. I definitely have it as my favorite pop album of the year so far. Let's move on. Something perhaps a little less cheery.
Joe, why did you make me listen to this album?
So the next album we're talking about is "The Origin of My Depression" by Uboa.
What do you
Uh,
think Uboa stands for? Do you think that's just one word, or do you think it's an acronym?
I heard,
Ultra brassy orange anaconda.
um
Ungodly ungodly boa of ages.
I never thought it was an acronym.
You better watch out.
You better watch out. I mean, you better watch out for this album if you're in a happy mood and you don't want it destroyed. So,
What's the name of the album, Joe?
"The Origin of My Depression." So it does give you it does warn you, like fair warning. This is like a dark ambient post-industrial,
Death Industrial.
death industrial, excuse me, record.
I don't know. That's what I term it as. I don't know if that's a genre.
Fair enough. And usually, in my opinion, that can either go two ways. I can either think it's trying way too hard to be edgy, or I can think it's brilliant. And fortunately for this album, I lean towards the latter on that one. I do think there's a lot of brilliance in this album.
I've only been able to bring myself to listen to this album twice. The first time was walking to work. While I appreciated a lot of the layering in it and the intensity in the performance, I felt it a little try hard. I listened to it again yesterday on a very dark day, playing it as loud as I could through the expensive speakers my dad owns, letting it echo through my house, standing in the middle of my room, frozen in fear, feeling the weight carried by the album sinking me into the floor. It really corners every aspect of mental anguish that's brought on
Hmm.
by depression, and this is not an album to comfort you and letting you know you're not alone in feeling this way. It's the sonic embodiment of the pressure of existence in a world and a body that doesn't care if you're
Hmm.
okay, grinding you down until this breaking point is reached. I think each track will leave you feeling hopeless and lost in a different way, treading musical ground from screaming industrial cacophonies to empty, desolate soundscapes, still always flowing in a way that keeps them noticeably linked, just like all symptoms of the same
Hmm.
disease. I can't think of a time I've listened to an album that has made me feel as hopeless as this album has. Like with Death
Wow.
Consciousness, which we talked about earlier
Yeah.
this year, I can listen to the climax of Earth Mover and hear the bassist just audibly throw his bass down as he finds it too much to keep playing and just feel completely moved by that moment and how it was captured on tape. And there's some sort of sense of beauty in that despair. Whereas here, I feel an entirely different emotional response, which I'm just too
Yeah.
terrified to return to.
That was incredibly well put, Nick. I feel like I need to give you a round of
That's
applause
all my
for
notes.
that.
I have
Wow. Okay, well this album, I more or less agree with pretty much everything you've said there. It does remind me a little bit of Anna von Householt's record last year, in as much as I found it incredibly effective at putting you in a certain headspace. It draws you in and makes you feel the emotion that the artist wants you to feel. And in this case, it's just complete utter mental dissonance, which she's so good at these kind of rattling dark ambient passages. And I remember it's track 3, after the origin of my depression, which is it's so rattling and creepy, and it just feels like you've got some, like your skin is crawling with bugs. And then all of a sudden, Lay Down and Rock comes in, and the harsh noise blasts in such a chaotic way that it just ah
We've got
it
the short track. Was it "Please Don't Leave Me"? Or
yeah,
yeah, that is one of the most terrifying, intense 2 minutes of music
it's
I've ever
brutal.
heard. It's absolutely flooring. It will annihilate your. It will just leave your head and your soul ringing.
Yeah, yeah,
And then there are moments on the album like "An Angel of Great and Terrible Light," which is in my top tracks of the year.
yeah.
It's the
Love
only
that
one that
track.
I mean, I say I've listened to the album twice. I've listened to that track more times because that's one of the ones I can stand to listen to, and it is just it's the most amazing crescendo of a song. The way that it slowly builds up each element.
Yeah, and
It's,
then the noise increasing at the end is just so damn good. So
it's
yeah.
really, really affecting.
And the lyrics themselves, if you can read along, because she does scream a lot of the lyrics in a way that you're probably not always going to hear all of them, but they are very, very striking
God,
as well.
I've read them. There's on the origin of my depression while she's screaming about all the things that have not caused her depression.
Yeah.
It makes it all the more scary to think about. You think about the way that you go through this life and all
Mm.
manner of good things can happen to you. Like you secure your first house, you get into a relationship, you get a promotion at work, and then everything can just be just torn down in an instant.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, because she starts off with her vocal performance very quiet, very unnerved, and then all of a sudden, partway through, she's shouting. She's shouting, "You're the origin of my depression." And then one similarly, "All the doors are slamming shut. Every sneering face is a parody of you." And I was just like, oh, that really hit me. That really hit me. So, I mean, yeah, depression is a big theme in the album. Another theme is her relationship with her gender dysphoria and being trans, which comes up in quite a few songs. The first song, "Detransitioning," where she says, "I'm just some girl trying her best, ugly as sin." And then in "An Angel of Great and Terrible Light," you've got this verse: "The grace of God is infinitely kind, even though he left the door ajar. Unconditional love, whilst mutilating, is a little too much love to bear. Are we mistakes, or are we going exactly to plan? Women are made in his image, like a broken photocopier." And I was just like, damn,
Yeah.
that is that is some intense stuff right there.
I think
So
that the lyrics are great if you do read along to them. You don't really need to hear them in the album to understand what
yeah,
she's trying to
the
convey.
distress.
There's
Yeah,
this her vocal performance is unlike any other I think I've heard.
yeah. It's so, her screaming is so, it feels so genuine.
It's not like in because I mean you could quite wrongly categorize this into some sort of metal genre, and
Mm,
it's not a metal album. There are perhaps some elements that might make you think that's kind of black metally,
mm.
but the her screaming in it is not done as a sort of a gimmick of the genre. That it sounds entirely like it's coming from the heart.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I can, in good conscience, give this album a 10 after just two listens. And I'm not sure how easy I'm going to be able to bring myself to listen to it again. But for now, it's getting a very strong 9.
I'm giving it a strong 9 as well. I mean, the only reservations I've ever, like, I felt with this album the last few times I've listened to it, the final track, "Misspent Youth," while I think it's largely fantastic, sometimes I do feel like I'm a little bit too exhausted after listening to that track. Maybe that's the point.
I
But
think
yeah,
that's
I feel
probably after An Angel of Grey and Terrible Light. That's probably my second favourite. Well, I say
yeah.
favourite. I hate listening to it, but there's
Yeah.
it's such a it chills my bones. It makes me feel
Mm.
like I'm covered in ice.
Yeah, I mean this is definitely at least a 9 out of 10 for me as well. So that's what I'm giving it on this episode of the
It's
podcast.
kind of heart wrenching to know that it took listening to it on a terrible day to have it fully impact
Mm,
me. I don't like listening to it after the first time. I thought it might be trying a bit too hard. I don't feel that anymore at
no.
all.
No. So um
I don't want to call this album of the year because that just feels wrong.
I feel it's an artistic project that has an incredible amount of merit to it. So I'm going
She's
I'm going to
she's
leave it at that, I
she's
think.
kind of
And
blown up from this as well. Like Uboa was not known particularly well at all
no,
before this, and now this album seems to be getting some traction, and that's just
yeah,
awful.
that's I mean, it's awful but great because depression and terrible feelings are a valid source of artistic creation. So I think I get what you're saying, that it's bad that such awful emotions have to exist in this world. But at the same time, I think incredible art has been made out of them, and I think that's worthy of a lot of praise. So
Well, we can move on now
yes, let's
before we get to just despair filled,
yes.
too despondent and carry on.
Right then, what are we talking about next, Nick?
We're talking about the new album, the last album by UK band. Her name is Calla, which is
Yes.
called Animal Choir. It's, like I said, supposedly the final album from this band, and it's unfortunately the first album I've heard by them.
Same.
I found it through looking at Sputnik Music's like top albums of each month, and this was towards the top of one of them. I listened to it. It is a long album. It's
Yes.
15 tracks and 78 minutes long, and I mean, it being a long album is one of the primary reasons I have reservations about it.
Yeah.
I'm not generally fond of albums that surpass the hour-long mark, and they have to be pretty damn special to justify it. So, does it merit its length? I'm going to say nearly, because
Yeah, I was just gonna say yes and no.
there isn't a single track on this album that I don't really like. Every time I sit down to listen to it, I manage to
Hmm.
get the whole way through without getting bored. I get really into it. I have a great time. It's just when I still find myself a bit hesitant to actually sit down to listen to it because of
Yeah,
its length.
I think I feel the same.
It's quite a
Yeah.
commitment that I haven't quite gotten over. In a way, the fact that there are so many tracks which add the length are quite refreshing, I think, because as there are three shorter instrumental tracks that come towards the middle of the album in a run of six,
Yeah.
and they help transition between these three other songs, which are each over 6 minutes long. I feel like without those extra tracks to be there, the album would actually feel longer.
Yeah, I completely agree.
For the record, I haven't mentioned it yet. The genre of this band, they are sort of a cross between alt rock and post rock, I'd say.
Yeah.
There are some clear influences from bands like, say, Radiohead in there. And they're
Yeah.
very good at this sort of slow burn build style that post rock is so fond of.
Yeah. One of my reservations with this album, I don't think it's so much a reservation, but I would say don't go into this album expecting 100% originality, because there were moments on this album that I did think could have been lifted from Radiohead, from Porcupine Tree, from The Pineapple Thief, from Have a Nice Life. Not to the point where I would say that they were ripping them off, but I do think influences are very clear on this album.
I don't find any problem with that. I mean, the influences are clear, but I feel like they managed to make every single one of them sound like their own creation.
Hmm.
There's never a point where I felt like, yeah, that's a rip off from Radiohead.
Yeah. On the other side, the drumming is pretty awesome in this album.
I think a lot. Just there's so much of this album that I love. Honestly, where to start? The album, I think, for how long it is, does flow very well. It throws songs of different degrees of intensity at you, and it never slows to a point of tedium or rushes and becomes overwhelming. Like, for example, on A Modern Vesper, you've got these booming electronics, which follow
Yeah.
on a few tracks after the wispy piano of Kaleidoscoping and the dissonant crunching guitar of Bleach. There are so many tracks which are able to, like, for their length, are able to balance out quieter sections and louder sections, transitioning between the
Mm.
two exceptionally well. Because of the way that the album is laid out, it's not really one where you notice performances as much, though, as you've mentioned, the drumming is great. And the vocals on this album, so good.
Yeah,
Tom
I
Morris's
think
vocal
yes.
style is just astonishing.
Particularly on the song Robert and Gerda, I
Oh
thought.
yeah, the way he sings "I'm in Motion" as his voice just
Yeah,
quavers, it's
it
amazing.
was beautiful. Very beautiful.
Mm. And he's really good at just like getting emotion through his voice as well. There's a part on on the track "A Moment of Clarity" where he just yells, and that sound is the crunch of a human spirit breaking.
That is one of my favorite moments on the album. That lyric is so unnerving.
I know. it's just the way he delivers it is so
Yeah.
good. In fact, the whole bit of that verse, which is, and nightly they invade, picking away the scar tissues, so I can dream without black holes and without white noise. The city sleeps under cold, delicate stars, never winning or recovering, and that sound is the crunch of a human spirit breaking. I think the lyrics on
Oh,
this album are fascinating. They're very apocalyptic, which serves to the tone of the instruments perfectly. They also seem to be aimed at some sort of companion with sort of slight themes of love in there, particularly. On
hmm.
kaleidoscoping, you've got start a fire, start it anywhere. I listen to your voice on loop for hours, the speckles in the sound floating up, away from me, across the sea and above airwaves. There are lines meeting and spinning out. Step a quarter here and an eighth there. Step out of time and out of space. We're kaleidoscoping.
Yeah. One thing I am going to say about the lyrics on this album, I found a lot of individual lines and verses very beautiful within themselves, but I kind of struggled with them as well because I struggled really getting anything concrete out of them, like any particular story, or sometimes I'll just be thinking, what is this song actually about? And I wouldn't be able to tell you.
To me, it seems like it's coming from the apocalyptic world of confusion in which there's only one thing that sort of anchors in place, which is this companion. And that's why I feel like a lot of the lyrics being scattershot around with individual lines making sense, not necessarily in context with the others in the song. I'm fine with that because the imagery that I get from them is still
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, I might as well say one of my favorite lyrics on the album, from my favorite song actually, which is
Vanguard.
Vanguard. Yep. A parliament of oak and empty gestures, the chain links tattered, hanging on a slip knot. I thought the imagery in that particular line was fantastic.
It's fantastic lyrics to that song. I can't deny that. In fact, I mean, Vanguard's one of my favourite tracks on the album. I'll talk about some of my favourite tracks now,
Yep.
which, I mean, I mentioned what they were before, so it's probably not that much of a surprise to say Kaleidoscoping, Bleach, A Modern Vesper, and A Moment of Clarity, I think is a ridiculously strong just run through of tracks on the album. Kaleidoscoping sounds like, I mean, it creates this beautiful sonic environment using these minimal soft tones, and it still somehow builds without ever exploding, which leads nicely into the next track, Bleach, which is one of the heavier tracks on the album, with this use of 9/8 time and this distorted guitar explosion at the end, which is very harrowing.
Mm.
Going into A Modern Vesper, which goes quite unexpected with these pummeling electronic bass synth tones, which haven't been present on the album at all up to that point.
And it's so groovy, that
It is
song.
very groovy. It perfectly complements the driving
Yeah.
drum beat. And then A Moment of Clarity, which we've mentioned.
Yeah, my favorite string of tracks comes just after. I consider the start of it the coda of the A Moment of Clarity. Again, that lyric, and that sound is the crunch of a human spirit breaking is such an uncomfortable and unnerving climax, and that goes into A Rush of Blood, which is such a beautifully composed and performed pipe organ part. Which it's only 2 minutes long, but it segues so perfectly between A Moment of Clarity and the track afterwards, Frontier, which is one of my favorite tracks on the album. With it has this lovely finger-picked acoustic guitar, a beautiful understated string presence, and just a bittersweet love song in the lyrics. And I also particularly liked the climax, the coda at the end, which has this bell-like descending major scale within the context of minor chords, which I thought just had this perfect bittersweet touch to the end. I thought it's a very striking moment, which I particularly liked. And then another Sieg, Pyre, which has I didn't actually know exactly what instrument it was. It sounded like a harp, but I don't think it is.
As long as it sounded good, that's all that
Yes,
matters.
that's all that matters, and it was plucked and it was very beautiful, and that led very nicely into my favorite track on the album, Vanguard, which has these deeply, deeply eerie strings, plodding piano, which sounds like it could have been inspired by Sail to the Moon or Pyramid Song by Radiohead. A fantastic vocal performance, and as I said, the imagery in the lyrics I thought was fantastic, and the climax is great as well,
Yeah.
with strings going all over the place, which is my favorite kind of
Strings.
strings. Yeah,
When it sounds like the string section has just fallen down a flight of
yeah,
stairs.
it's great. I really really enjoyed that
The
stretch.
inner sadist in Joe coming
Yes.
out. Hurt those strings.
I love the chaos. Love the chaos.
I'll actually mention my favourite track on the album comes a little bit after that, and it is Robert and Gerda, which, I mean, technically probably isn't as interesting or well composed as Vanguard is, but the vocal performance on it just really strikes me.
Yeah,
It really hits,
very
and I
beautiful.
do like a good crescendo, which is what the
Yeah.
second half of the track pretty much is.
Yeah, and I do what I do like about that track is that while a lot of the tracks previously very much minor keys, very moody, Robert and Gerda has this kind of uplifting vibe to it, which I think is very, very welcome at this point in the album, going towards the last stretch.
And then it goes into Bloodlines, which is another suitably long track. It's probably one of the more conventional tracks on the album, and I do like the way that, as you said, towards the end stretch, it does become a little bit more uplifting to see you off. Not so fond of the final track. I think it could have
Hmm.
ended on Bloodlines quite easily, but I mean, I still like the track.
Yeah, it's not a bad track.
It's not a bad track at all. In fact, I like it a lot. It's just, I think the album could have ended slightly better. I thought for a while about whether to give this album an 8 or a 9, and I think I've decided on giving it a 9 because you only live once.
Fair enough.
I like this album a
Yes.
lot. I'm so sad it's their final album.
Yeah. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. There were no tracks on this album that I didn't like. There were a few. I know you said you liked Kaleidoscoping. It didn't do quite as much for me. And a couple of tracks towards the end I don't think hit quite as hard as they wanted to, especially when you've got Vanguard and Robert and Gerda in the last portion of the album. But I mean, other than that, I think it's fantastic, and anyone who's a fan of alternative rock or post rock will find something to enjoy in this album. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10.
Which is a good score.
Very good score.
I bought it on vinyl. I just did it.
Awesome.
I went online and looked it up and saw that there were only 300 copies in existence, and once they were sold out, that would be it. And I just did it.
Oh, you had to.
It's such a good album. I want to
It
support
is.
the people I like.
Yes.
Well, let's finish off by talking about some tracks, because there are quite a few individual tracks from albums that we didn't talk about earlier this year, either because we didn't have so much to say about the album, or we didn't like the album, or
Yeah.
for whatever
Yeah.
reason. There are just a few tracks that we want to talk about.
Cool.
Should I start?
Yes.
Right. Well, I'm going to start by talking about Kelly Chris. We talked about Kelly Chris last year with his album collaborating with Jean Grey, his wife.
Yes.
I liked it a lot. You liked it somewhat.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did like it. Yeah.
His new album Guns, it didn't really stick with me very much. I thought it was all right, but the penultimate track on the album, "You, Me, and Nobody Else," it's so lovely. It's just a really lovely track about Kelly Chris's love for his wife Jean Grey,
Nah.
and she makes an appearance on it as well, which makes it all the more lovely.
Yeah.
It turns out
yeah.
she's got a good voice for
And
singing.
the vocal performance is very nice,
Yeah,
very
the
endearing,
singing voice is nice,
and
and then
it works weirdly well with the odd janky piano
yeah,
backing.
I wrote in my notes, the backing is suitably dreamy, like going through a tunnel of love built by Kelly Chris's slightly warped musical stylings. There's got some
Yeah.
lovely lyrics on here. "I never would have imagined that we'd be an item, become a better me for you, good Lord knows I'm trying. Every night's a slice of light, every day's exciting. No pressure put onto testers could break a diamond."
Yeah,
That's so sweet.
it's very sweet.
And I want someone to write songs like that about me. I want Kelly Chris to write songs like that about me.
Maybe one day. Maybe one day, Nick. Moving on. I would call this song a guilty pleasure, except I have no emotions, so deal with it. The song is "It's You" by Fiat Lux from their album Saved Symmetry that they released earlier this year. It's a very cheesy song.
It's like Gouda melted over Parmesan.
Yes, it has cheesy synths. The lyrics are kind of cheesy. It's a cheesy love song, but it's so nice as well.
It is very sweet.
The synths are bright and summery. The bass line is my favorite bass line of the year. It starts off simple, but it builds up its flourishes and complements the rest of the track so well.
I really
in my
like the tone
opinion.
on that bass. It's got a slightly sort of slap feel to it, though not
Yeah.
being slapped. It gives it a nice little funky edge.
It's funky, it's bright, it's summery, and then
Yeah.
of course there's a saxophone that comes in halfway
Of
through.
course there is.
Very luxuriant, and this song has stolen my heart. So,
But imagine this, Joe. Fiat Lux Eterna.
ooh,
The collaboration between Fiat Lux and Motorpsycho that nobody knew they wanted.
I think I do want that now. Now that you've said that. But yeah, a very romantic track, which I very much like.
I'm going to talk about a song that isn't romantic in the slightest. Charos Cephal, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, by Alterage is quite possibly the heaviest track I've ever heard. I'm still not entirely sure that I like it. It's just, you got to give it credit for succeeding in what it's clearly trying to do.
Yeah.
I don't think it's terrifying in the same way that I think The Origin of My Depression is, but this track just gives me the willies. Like, okay, like as far as metal goes, you can either take it entirely seriously or not seriously at all. I think this is one of those tracks which you should try and take as seriously as possible to get the full effect from it. And the first half of the track is just this really intense wall of sound as every single instrument just pummels the life out of you. The mixing in that is actually surprisingly good. Abnormality had an EP out earlier this year, and it was kind of similar, but you just couldn't hear anything that was happening because it was mixed so badly. Whereas this, in this, I think it's done pretty well. It then cuts out into this almost silent, very quiet ambient section. It just racks up the tension until you know it's going to come back and just hit you in the face. Man, it's scary. It's like being held hostage against your will in a basement.
I
And
pretty
the
much
basement's
agree.
leaking
Yeah.
blood.
Yes. I agree with everything you've just said. Do I think this track is for me? Probably not. I feel
I'm not sure this track's for me, Joe.
because sometimes I feel like I want a bit more narrative in my songwriting, I suppose. But this song definitely does what it sets out to do. So I very much give it credit for that.
It sets out to hurt your feelings.
They are suitably hurt.
I am offended. Tell us
Right
about
then.
something that's nice.
That's nice is the song Airplane by Wand, which they released with their album Laughing Matter earlier this year. This song is my favourite therapy song of the year, and by that I mean it's one of those songs where I sit back, lie down, and just relax and just transport myself into a meditative state.
It's like you're floating on
Oh,
a
it's,
no, floating on an airplane. That's why they
yes,
called it airplane,
yes.
because you float. I need a second.
And then I love the bass line as well. It's so simple, but I never get bored of it throughout the song's 9 minute runtime that it is. And it forms a really nice bass for the song as well. It's quite sparse.
The
And
bass forms a bass.
the bass forms a bass for the
How
song.
fitting.
But the sparsity of the bass line allows all these very subtle, understated layers to come in. It comes to a bit of noisiness partway through, but only quietly, creating this very interesting texture in the first part of the track. And then there's a guitar solo towards the end of the track as well, which compositionally and tonally is quite janky and dissonant, but it just works its way into the song in a way that doesn't feel intrusive at all, which is a moment that I particularly like as well.
I like this track a lot. There's one thing that I'm slightly indifferent about, which is the vocals. I think they're quite serviceable and they're pleasant enough, but I think that the backing deserves vocals that are just a touch softer. I don't know whether that's so much to do with her vocal style or the mixing of it, but just
Yeah.
a little softer.
Oh. I thought the vocals were suitably understated myself,
It's
and
only a tiny reservation.
but I thought they were fine. They weren't a problem for me personally, and the track is very gorgeous to listen to.
I'm going to talk about another lovely track now, which
Yes.
is Summer Skin by Parik and Singh. I actually heard this song for the first time in 2018, but it is the official single off of the album that they released this year, Science City, and it's just one of the most dreamy songs of the year.
It's so charming.
It really lives up to the dream pop genre that I think they are
Yeah.
sort of a part of. The arrangements are exceptionally pleasing. They really like just pull the melody from each instrument that's present, and they pair up timbres between choices of instruments very well, like the plucked guitar twinned with the flute.
Yeah.
I think flute needs to be used more in songs.
Flute is
Not
good.
used enough.
Mm.
Well done, Lizzo, bringing it back. And then you've got the drums as well, which I'm a big fan of because they're sort of lovingly understated, yet they perform these quite unconventional drum patterns. It reminds me somewhat of the Tiger Lilies at times. The way their drummer never sticks to like a simple beat. He's providing the rhythmic
Mm.
section, but he's sort of going around his kit quite a lot, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I just like that it's quite bright and summery, and I feel like the harmonies are very luxuriant, and that works. It is a cheesy song, but it works well for that.
I actually feel like this song has more of an autumnal feel, which is interesting considering it's called Summer Skin. Then again,
Hmm.
the lyrics are "My summer skin is growing thin," so
It's end of summer.
end of summer, going into autumn. So
Yes.
they have succeeded. Talking of the lyrics, I think that part of the reason why they work is because Parek's vocals are very smooth and endearing, and the lyrics are a little on the side of corny, but I like them.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people won't, but the final section of the song, which is sort of quiet and very, the emphasis is on the lyrics and the vocals. The verse goes, "It feels like I'm ready to say goodbye to the only love I ever had in my life. There's no Beatles song that can change my mind. Yes, I'm ready to say goodbye. As I gaze up at the night sky, I ponder the momentariness of life. There's no Woody Allen film that could slow down time. Oh, time, time's a waste of life." It's very corny,
It's so corny.
but I like it.
Yeah. I don't hate it. I don't hate it, but it is
High praise from Joe.
it's
I don't hate it.
it is corny though.
It is very corny, but I will give it a pass.
Yeah.
Talk about something else, Joe.
So I'm going to talk about Ridiculous Heart by David Gray from his album Gold in a Brass Age, released earlier this year. The reason why I like this song is, I mean, it's very, very simple. I like the percussion. I just find it so hypnotic. The way it rolls, and it's so dynamic, and it it kind of layers into the bass and keyboard parts really delicately. I seem to have picked a lot of soft tracks.
I like this track for a different reason, which is the synths are sufficiently twinkly.
Ah, I mean that's true as well.
I mean, other than that, I don't really have a huge amount to say about this track. It's pleasant, but it does sort of pass me by each time I listen to it.
Hmm. I mean, I have to say I don't have a huge amount to say about it
I know
either, other than
I
I
have
find
one more
it,
note. The vocal layerings are very pleasant.
yeah, vocal layerings are pleasant. It's one of those songs that to me is just ear candy. I enjoy listening to it a lot.
I don't think it's one that you're meant to intently listen to.
Hmm.
So I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah.
My next track is also quite pleasant. I feel like I've chosen quite a few pleasant tracks on my top 30 of the year. Anyway, Harmony Hall by Vampire Weekend, whose
Yes.
new album was
Lengthy.
lengthy.
Something
Yeah, 17 tracks, wasn't it?
like
That's
that.
2 tracks too many. I think if your album is over 15 tracks, you're probably doing something wrong. Cough, cough, Flying Lotus. Anyway,
We'll get to that.
and I think one of the main problems with the album is that this track is the second track, and every track after it is just not as good.
True.
This song is
True.
catchy AF.
Yes.
Catchy as fun.
It has this lovely, bright, summery guitar riff. I'm saying summery for a
Yeah.
lot of these tracks a
It
lot.
reminds me of why I used to love Vampire Weekend so much. I mean,
Yeah.
the guitar runs at the beginning are just beautiful. And there's a surprising amount of performance on show throughout the track in the guitar work and the piano work. Talking of the piano in the chorus is just guaranteed to fill you with joy.
It's so
And it also
bouncy and fun.
it provides a rhythmic layer to the track, which is equally as nice. Ezra's voice is as sweet as ever, and then it's
Yeah.
got these two instrumental interludes of
Oh, it's kind of like a baroque pop
Mm.
kind of bridge, which just it just feels nice.
Yeah, it's a great
Feels nice.
transition from the chorus into the pre-chorus into the chorus again.
Yeah.
I don't know. Would you call it pre-chorus or would you call the other bit a post-chorus?
I think it's
The chorus is very much split into two parts. Put it
yeah.
that way. Anyway, yeah, the guitar work in that second bridge is very, very nice.
Mm.
Not something you would get so
Mm.
much, I think, from this sort of genre.
Yeah. I will say this was on my shortlist of the top songs of the year, but it didn't quite make my cut into the top 30. But now having listened to it again, I'm feeling like I might have to reconsider because it is so full of happiness.
It made it higher onto my list than I expected it to.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's a very great track. If you check out that song rather than the whole album, is
Yeah,
what we'll say. Did
definitely.
we say what the name of the track was?
Yes, Harmony Hall.
Harmony Hall. Good. I was just just making sure.
And the album is called Father of the Bride, and it has one of the worst album artworks of this year.
Was it the one that's just like a picture of the
It's a
Earth?
picture of the Earth with Vampire Weekend wrapped around it,
Oh, yeah,
and Sony Music at the bottom.
fair enough.
It's really boring.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know why, but I have a real problem with the fact that part of the official album artwork is the bit that says Sony Music at the bottom. That just really irritates me.
Oh dear.
Well, are you going to talk about something else nice, or are you going to talk about something else that's not nice?
I want to talk about something nice because that's how I've listed it on my Word document. So you mentioned that Flying Lotus album had way too many tracks.
It did.
It did. The album was Flamagra, I think.
Yeah, it had 2 tracks on it that I liked.
Yes. And the one that I particularly liked the most was Remind You.
This was one of them.
And yeah, Flying Lotus's album, it was far too erratic.
Yeah, I
with
don't,
too many tracks,
I
not
do
enough
not
motifs.
remember most of it. I remember Fire Is Coming because it had David Lynch in, and David Lynch is a legend.
Yeah. But this track stood out to me as one of the best because it's essentially based on one motif. It takes a kind of baroque approach to it. It's that this you could almost describe this track as modern classical if it didn't use so many electronic tones to it.
Yeah.
But it has this ascending do 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 kind of pattern to it that's layered so well.
And I do like the way the piano swells in and out of the track.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's inhaling and exhaling.
Yeah, it builds itself up, crescendos, takes itself apart, and has these variations on the motif as well. I sound like my old A-level teacher, um, but I think it's an incredibly well composed
It's a
piece
short
of
and
music.
sweet track.
It's,
I feel
yeah.
like it doesn't stay around for too long. It gave me a very specific emotion, which is it. The track makes me feel happy, but in a kind of a sad way. Like I'm saying goodbye to a friend at an airport who is just departing to go to a different continent to pursue their dream.
I can understand that because I was getting a kind of fairy tale vibe to it, but the kind of fairy tale where there are monsters afoot potentially.
I think ultimately the song leaves me feeling full of like emotion in a positive way, though I am kind of a bit, I don't know, just sad at the same time. That's
I think
really
yeah.
a cop-out way of describing it, but
Yeah, but I think it's the one track on the album where I felt like I was satisfied by it in its entirety. So yeah, I really enjoyed that track.
I'm going to talk about my final track, which is a good one.
A very good
A
one,
very
in my
good one.
opinion.
Low Slow by Laura Stevenson. I have mentioned on previous podcasts that I liked this album a lot. This track is wow. Laura Stevenson has one of my favourite voices ever to begin with. She's got this slightly nasal yet stunningly proficient and controlled vocal style, which just makes it all sound all the more human. It's not like your Ariana Grande's, where it's like, yeah, she has a nice voice, but a very tailored, nice voice to the pop world. You would be mistaken, I think, to call the backing in the opening verses minimal, as they layer together perfectly, and yet somehow they don't overwhelm what is clearly the focal point, which is her vocal delivery. It just enhances it. The tempo of this track is just emotion stirringly perfect, and
It's a slow song.
The
and,
intimacy
yeah.
that's achieved on this it's just staggering.
Well, the sparsity of the arrangement helps with that, and it feels all that more dramatic when the climax hits. And it's just on this song, everything comes together so perfectly. The performance, the lyrics, the arrangement, the build, the slow tempo works its way towards one of my favorite crescendo. Well, you wouldn't call it
climax.
It's a climax, yeah. One of my favorite climaxes of the year.
I'm going as far as to say one of my favorite climaxes ever.
Yeah.
The way she sings "Embrace Yourself and Fall into the Air" is completely flooring.
It's incredible.
Everything around me just stops when she sings that.
Yeah. I mean, it does for me as well, except from the one time I sent you the Snapchat of me lip syncing along to that.
Joe has recently got Snapchat, and Joe is still trying to work out how to use it.
Yeah.
The lyrics on this song appear to be about a very specific person, but the way she uses second person in the final section will convince you that she is singing about your accomplishments.
Yeah.
Amaze them with your old fantastic.
Oh, it's so... oh, I'm getting chills just hearing that.
I don't cry to music or things that I probably should cry at, but it's one of those songs where I would cry.
Yeah, it's definitely emotional. It's definitely emotional. Be prepared.
Well, let's finish off by talking about your final track, which is different to the last seven or so tracks we've talked about.
Yes, PAT by Denzel Curry. We talked.
Deet play that boys a.
Yes, yes. We talked about his album Taboo last year, which definitely had quite a few highlights on it.
And also a lot of low points.
Yes. And then Denzel Curry's album this year.
Joke.
Oh, like hummus dip.
Like hummus dip.
Well, we'll get to the lyrics on this song in a second. But his album Zoo this year had. Okay, I might need to give Nick a second here.
Like hummus dip. Oh God,
Okay.
Denzel.
Okay.
God.
We recovered.
I want that out of my system. Though he does have another very funny line on this song as well.
Yeah, which I will. It might be different to the one I got written down, but
I think it's going to be the same line.
His album Zoo this year kind of passed me by. It didn't really have as many lowlights or highlights to me, but then this track, the closing track, oh, I love how abrasive
God,
it is.
Denzel can go hard when he wants to.
Oh,
That bass is filthy.
oh, it is filthy but gorgeous.
This is the third time in this podcast that I have felt scared of a song.
Oh, it's so gritty and.
I listened earlier this year to Denzel Curry's cover of Bulls on Parade by Rage Against the Machine, and I was just startled there by how hard he can
He
go.
goes
He kind of
in.
showed that on Vengeance on his previous album, Taboo.
Yeah.
And I that was my favourite track on the album. Then on that cover, I was just astonished. And then here, he somehow just goes harder.
Yeah, I mean, everything is hard. The bass line, the distorted synth line that couples it, complements it brilliantly. And then his delivery is so aggressive as well. As is Play That Boys A. His verse is very aggressive as well. And it's just, I mean, the performance is fantastic. The lyrics... Okay, there's this one line. It makes me laugh. Contact, sit out, I'm a holder for all black, sticks out like I'm Voldemort.
That's the same one that makes me laugh every single time.
I mean,
what does it mean?
It's dumb, but I kind of love it anyway. Definitely one of my favourite hip hop tracks of the year, I think. Just because of how hard it goes in and the textures are great. Everything about it is abrasive, and all the abrasiveness works together in the words are failing me. The way all the abrasive parts come together to make an ultra abrasive song, it works really well.
Let's finish off by just shouting out a few of the albums we did listen to over the past month or so.
Yeah.
The main one I want to mention is the newer Fools of Rorus album, Patterns in Mythology. It's a black metal album, and I think it's probably the best metal album of the year so far. I just found myself quite emotionally invested in a lot of the tracks. I don't think the bookends of the album are quite so great, but the track New Inertia is amazing.
I've got quite a few ones to shout out. I listened to the new Skillet album, Victorious. It's a horrible radio rock album. Don't listen to it. 2 out of 10.
I haven't been able to bring myself to listen to it yet. Talking about other bad albums, we listened to Kaiser Chief's new album Duck together. Yeah. And the first song has a chorus which you could apply to the sound of most of the other tracks on the album.
Yeah.
I can't even remember how it goes now. It wasn't particularly memorable.
No, but you were right. We were literally singing that chorus to every single other song. And then on other songs, there were chord progressions and melodies that were just common or lifted. And I mean, I gave it a 3 out of 10.
I gave it a 3 out of 10.
It was not good, unfortunately.
Anything else we listened to? Comethazine has a new album out.
I mean, I didn't listen to
Gawksy 3.5. I mean, it's better than 2. It's still underdeveloped, and it still has dreadful album artwork. I recommend you look it up sometime.
Yep. On the trend of not so good albums, Chance the Rapper.
The Big Day.
The Big Day.
Yep.
I gave it a 4 out of 10.
I gave it a 4. It's long and uninteresting, but there are a few hits on it.
Yeah.
I think it's not worth the zero that Anthony Fantano gave it for
It's
sure.
definitely better that like you can listen to it in a shop and it's not going to send you recoiling, but it's not,
No, it's not.
it's not
It's
good
not.
either.
Lingua Ignota had a new album out.
Yes.
I think, I mean, I liked it. It's another album I found intense and kind of a bit terrifying. I gave it an 8 the first time I listened to it, but on another listen, I think it might go down to a 7.
Yeah. I gave that album a 7 out of 10. And I don't know whether this is harsh to say. I liked the album. I mean, of course I did. A 7 is still a good score, but
Yeah.
I kind of felt like I wasn't getting much out of the album that I wouldn't be able to get something better out of from different artists. But it's still a good album. And if you're into the kind of neoclassical darkwave genre, you should definitely check it out as a noteworthy release, I think.
Yeah. There's an album I listened to in the past month which came from earlier in the year, which is "This Was Supposed to Be Fun" by Epic Beardmen. I think it's on the verge of being my favorite hip hop album of the year. I love the lyrics, I love the performances, the beats are very fun. Not sure if I'm going to give it an 8 or it might go up to a 9 at some point. For now, it's at an 8. There's a track on it called Shin Splints where they're trying to catch a plane, and I think it's hilarious. I love that track.
I listened to the new I Am the Morning album, which is a fantastic rock pop, chamber pop record. It's probably my favorite modern classical album of the year currently. I have been very much enchanted by it. Great use of harmonies, texture, piano, time signatures. So it's basically my cup of tea.
Yeah, I this is an album that very much appeals to Joe. We listened to it together. I thought it got a bit stale the more it went into the album. I found myself getting less and less invested in the tracks as it went on, but I can't deny the craft of it. It is incredibly well
I
composed.
I personally really liked it and
Yeah,
would give it an 8 out of 10.
I'd still give it a 6, which means I
Yeah.
like it. There's one more album I want to talk about, and that's the new Bon Iver album, I, comma I.
I haven't listened to it.
I like if I add vocoder, it becomes art. It's okay. Forever, Forever Ago is a good album. Bon Iver is a good album, but I think it was about the point that I realised that every single one of their albums has a comma in the middle of it. That I just suddenly started disliking Bon Iver
Oh,
because I think they changed the name of their second album to Bon Iver, Bon Iver, so that the albums would follow that trend. And there's just something about what's his name, Justin Vernon,
hmm.
that just pisses me off. This is smug music for smug people. And this album, I, no, you, it
Okay.
feels like for an album that's trying to be interesting, it isn't half boring.
Is this one I should give a miss then?
I gave it a 4 out of 10
Mm.
because at the end of the day, I don't want to let my personal feelings about Bon Iver and how smug they are get in the way of the music. But I don't think it's a great album.
Okay then. I've got a couple more to shout out. I really liked Kiri Variations by Clark, which is a really I thought was an interesting electronic kind of synth dungeony type album. And then I saw all over the internet that no one else seemed to like it, so I seem to be very much on my own on that one. But I actually really enjoyed it, so screw you, I like it.
I did listen
Uh,
to a Dungeon album earlier this year, actually. What was it? Malfet.
Malfet, that was
The
a good
The Way to
album.
Avalon. I liked that.
That was a good
It
album. I
would
like
work
that
well for
too.
playing D&D too.
Yes. Above and Beyond released their new album, Flow and State, which is 3 discs.
Oh no,
And
that's not a good start.
I really enjoyed the first disc. In fact, I would, by itself, I would give it an 8 out of 10. I thought it was a fantastic ambient electronic project that flowed completely from start to finish, was interesting and engaging throughout. But then the second disc was electronic ambient with spoken word over the top and was like EP length. It was 5 tracks, I think. And then the third disc was the first disc except rearranged somewhat. And I kind of thought, why?
Why?
I would have been happy with just give me the first, like I will listen to the first disc of it probably quite a few times throughout this year. If I'm generous enough to cut it off from the rest of the album, it might make my top projects of the year. But I just kind of thought, why? Why did you decide to make it this 3-disc project, which didn't really make much sense? So yeah, that's both positive and negative on that one. And then last album I want to talk about is Our Secret Spot by the Hiatus, which is a band that released one of my favourite albums, or at least one of the albums I've listened to the most. And I was kind of disappointed that they decided to just make a radio rock record. But then I listened to it again and I thought, this is still better radio rock than most.
Better than Kaiser Chiefs.
Better than Kaiser Chiefs. I'd give it like a strong 6 out of 10. It had nice tracks. In fact, I would recommend the track Time Is Running Out, which is not a Muse cover, but it's a very nice track.
They could probably do a good Muse cover.
They probably could.
Like, improve the drums of it.
So yeah, kind of enjoyed that one.
Big sigh from Joe. Did
Sigh.
you really hate it that much?
I really enjoyed it.
God,
I was
can't-
exhausted.
Let's see how it is. God, I put my heart and soul into that one. Jeez.
I mean, talking about the origin of my depression, and then her name is Calla, and
I
then
thought you were going to say, talking about the origin of my depression. This is the origin of my
This
depression.
is the
Doing
origin.
this podcast.
Oh, there are plenty other origins, I can assure you. Anyway, let's not get into that. Let's wrap up the podcast. I have been Joe.
And I've been Nick.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
F sharp. A sharp. Revisited.